Tonight on Behind the Panels, we're sitting down with one of the most influential storytellers of the last 30 years, a creator behind some of the most iconic moments in comics and television. From The Long Halloween and Hush to Heroes in Smallville, his work didn't just entertain us, it helped shape the modern genre of storytelling. So this evening, we're exploring the stories behind the stories, the collaborations, the breakthroughs, and the moments that built a legacy. Please join me and my partner in nerd culture, Cliff on Comics, in welcoming Mr. Jeph Loeb to Behind the Panels.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not real good at when folks say this is the guy that did this and did that and did this, because the truth is everything that I've been involved with has always been the product of a team, and I'm very excited to talk about everything, but I want the audience, I guess that's who we're going to. I was going to say readers. There's not readers. To know that I was and continue to still be extraordinarily lucky to work with the exceptional show people and people in production and on the other side in comics, the artists and inkers and my good luck charm, my letterer and designer Richard Starkings and the folks over at Comicraft. So just want to say that up front in case anybody ever feels like, oh, you mentioned me. Well, no.
Very humble, and we're glad to hear all your stories and collaborations.
And just as I'm prepared to say, there's so much history, so many stories, so many creative crossroads that you've stood at, and we're excited to tackle all of it tonight.
Okay.
Your craft, your choices, moments that shaped the works that many fans love today. And Rich, you get to kick it off with the first question.
All right. So, when you think back to your childhood, what were the stories, characters, or influences that first sparked your imagination and made you fall in love with the art of storytelling?
Wow, that's a great question. There are a number of answers. The short ones, and probably less influential, was that I was 10 or 11 years old. And I had a 9-inch Sony black and white television set, which I still own actually, that sat by my bedside. And when my parents went off to sleep, I grew up in New York City. And so at 11 o'clock, there was something called The Late Show, which was a series of black and white films, which it wasn't until later in life that I realized, oh, they just had the Warner Brothers library. That it wasn't just random stuff. And I would watch every night. I would watch Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney and George Raft and Edward G. Robinson, which is where my love of gangster films comes from. But there were also like comedies and all kinds of different genres that Warner's was making, mostly as B films. They were like 90-minute movies. And after a while, I started to notice that there were people who I recognized their names, like, for example, Michael Curtiz, who directed a little film called Casablanca, but also did other movies like Roaring Twenties. And so when the credits would start, I would start looking at, and remember, I'm 10 or 11 years old. I didn't know what a director did. I didn't know what a writer did. I didn't even know what a producer did. I just knew that these people were the storytellers. I obviously knew who the actors were. And so I became aware of, oh, these are made. There's a craft to this. I think a lot of people, even to this day, even though we're much more aware of people like Christopher Nolan and that kind of thing, and they actually promote movies that way, a lot of people just go to the movies to see movies. They're not really, they don't understand there's a set and there's all this stuff that's going on. I was reading something, I read the other day that, and I'm sorry if this is a spoiler, but that Ellen Pompey is going to do this show for Hulu, and it's not going to affect her being on Grey's Anatomy, which is in its 23rd season. And then the writer, and this is a respected writer, like it wasn't just a little tiny thing. This was like a news station, said, so I'm sure they've worked it out so that Ellen can get back to Seattle in time to shoot Grey's Anatomy. They shoot Grey's Anatomy in Burbank. There's no Seattle there. So that was something that I had to learn. I got to know about what the Warner Brothers lot looked like long before I would ever work on the Warner Brothers lot. So that's sort of case one. Case two, I got into comics the way everybody else did. It was a summer. I was on Cape Cod. I went to, in those days, I went to what was called a general store. Yes, I'm that old. And there was a spinner rack. For those of you that don't know, there was a time when comics were not in the beautiful thing that's behind you, Cliff, in the, it's like, you have a wall of comics. This was just a spinner rack. And condition was not important. Everybody bent them and did whatever you wanted. And I went down there, and I started reading, as most people, I started with Archie. Then I moved over to Superman and Batman. And Marvel, I always knew was sort of more adult oriented. I really wasn't a Spider-Man fan because Spidey talked about his girlfriend and his money problems and all the things that make Spider-Man as great as he is. But to an 11-year-old, I just wanted to see people like smash into each other. And so I remember it's Submariner number 30. And there's Captain Marvel, or Marvel, the one who passed away, not Carol Danvers, is in the water, on shallow water on the beach. And he says, come on, fish face, get in the water and fight me. This is on the cover. And I think it's a Sal Buscema cover. And so it in some ways, it's sort of a true romance cover. And Namor is on the beach, sort of a 3/4 profile, and he's turned away, a little girlish. And I'm not trying to say a bad thing about that. So stay off Reddit. I didn't say that in a bad way. He's a little girlish, and he goes, I can't go in the water, and I can't tell them why. And so I'm like, well, I want to find out why. So for, I think what was then 25 cents, I bought the comic. And in the middle of the comic, it said, Namor said, I just got back from fighting Iron Man, who I have no idea who Iron Man is. And then there was a little box from the editor, and it said, see Iron Man 35. So I went back to the comic spinner at the general store and found Iron Man 35. And in Iron Man 35, it said, well, I just got back from being with the Avengers. And the little box said, see Avengers 91. And so I went back and got Avenger. I'm sure I've got the numbers wrong. But and then I just started buying everything. It just became, I was an addict. And that addiction stayed with me till yesterday. I'm still reading comics like I was an 11-year-old. And so, and it probably has a lot to do with that. And then the last, and I think the most important, is that my dad, who I was very close with, was a storyteller, but he really wasn't a storyteller. My dad was a stockbroker for 35 years. But my dad would come home for dinner, and I would say, what happened today? And he would say, well, there were these really important documents. And I was told that they absolutely had to be delivered no later than 5 p.m. And it was already like 4:45. So I had 15 minutes to get to this place, and it's across town. And so I get to this place and I come inside, and of course the first thing that I see is that there's two guys that have guns, and there are these posters on the wall. They're wanted posters with huge amounts of money. And I managed to get all the way up to the front desk. And at the last minute, I hand it to the guy, and the guy stamps on it, and it's delivered. And I'm like, wow. And my dad had gone to the post office. He just made it sound like he was Indiana Jones. And so I picked up a lot of that, in that you could take a story like I just told you and make it into a thrilling adventure, or make it into something very sad or something very funny. And people like hearing those kinds of stories. And when people ask me what I do for a living, because I've worked in film and television and animation and comics and lots of other things, I tell them I'm a storyteller. It's much easier than trying to explain to them what a comic book writer does, or what a motion picture producer does, or what a television showrunner does. It just is not. Again, like I said, most people don't know that Grey's Anatomy is not shot in Seattle, or that nobody ever went to. I remember getting in an argument with my mother, who said, "How do you think they shot all that footage in Casablanca during the war?" And I was like, "Because they were in Burbank, Mom. Nobody went to Casablanca." And she said, No. Casablanca was shot in Casablanca." And I went, yeah, okay, fine. They were in North Africa. I don't know how they did it. It was a miracle. But that's good storytelling.
I gotta hand it to people. Then, now, maybe less now, because the AI is ruining everything for me. But the people who would go and scout locations and take photographs and get reference to create the illusions of the places, of the films and TV shows that we enjoy, but anything that took place in New York with a large apartment, automatically the illusion of reality is out the window.
I love shooting in New York. That was doing Daredevil and Luke Cage and all of those, what people call the Netflix shows. They're not the Netflix shows. They were shown on Netflix.
Well, that's the Netflix era. Right, but yeah, I guess people could call it the Netflix shows.
Again, if you go to see the Odyssey or Spider-Man, and you go to see it at the AMC theater that's in your town, or the Regal theater that's in your town, did Regal or AMC have anything to do with making those movies? No, they didn't. They aired them. They are the exhibitor. That now it's confusing, because Netflix actually does make its own thing, does have its own studio, does do all of that. Marvel Television and all the wonderful people who work there and worked with me on making those shows, The Punisher, Defenders, Iron Fist, all those shows were made by Marvel Television. And then we gave those shows finished to Netflix, and Netflix then put them on the air. In the same kind of way that when you watch a show that's on ABC or NBC or CBS, it can be made by Warner Brothers.
Right.
But there are many shows that I will watch to the end credit, and it'll say CBS Studio, but I know it's aired on NBC.
Correct.
And I'm like, oh, okay, that's fun.
But it is a shorthand that a lot of people do. They call those shows the Netflix shows, and it's a shame, because it does a disservice to the number of people at Marvel Television. And now there is a Marvel Television, and so it is a completely different thing. But I don't understand why they don't call those shows the Disney Plus shows, because they only air on Disney Plus. So, but that's now, the brand.
now the public has the perception that it's all under the House of Mouse. So now it's all just one family. So now it's changed because it's all Marvel. Well, Disney owns Marvel, so it's Marvel. It's also like when I run into people who think Marvel comics and Star Wars are like the same thing.
Oh no! Listen, most people, if you stop them and say, "Is Batman a Marvel hero or a DC hero?" they'll go, "I don't know, Marvel, I guess, because it's good, and so yeah, Marvel makes great movies and that kind of thing." I do still to this day get, "What do you mean you write Batman? Like you write the Batman movies?" I go, "No, I write Batman comics." "What do you mean?" And I go, "The comic books that come out every week. There's about 18 of them, actually, just of Batman." And the number of people who go, "They still make comics?" I said, "What do you think? They stopped making them in the 40s?" Like, it's like, yeah, of course they do. And in fact, in many ways, they're more popular now than they've ever been. So good for us.
Right, and you're really shining a light. So I mean, ever since the 1960s up until now, people are just not aware of how these things are done or how they're produced.
But I think in fairness to our business, which I respect and love, I don't think anybody knows where Nike is made or how a sneaker is made. And if you said to them that Nike is actually a Chinese company and we import them, they're not going to argue with you. They're not going to. And if you said to them, "No, they have headquarters up in Portland," you'd go, "Okay, great." And you could say to them, "Do they have headquarters in Chicago?" And they go, "Sure, whatever." But what they do know is Foot Locker didn't make them. They just know that this has nothing to do with comics. So let's go back.
Well, it is about creation, right? And like, and we'll test what we know based on our interest. So when it comes to comics, yes, I'm interested in what Jeph Loeb is doing, Spider-Man Blue or Hulk Gray, or like those stories. Great. Well, John's Comics with Friends was in the chat, and he is a huge fan of The Long Halloween, Batman, Superman, Hush. He also thinks you're a Titan. Very nice.
Okay.
But
I've never written I have written Teen Titans. They were in Supergirl too.
Yeah. Oh no, he called you a Titan.
No, it had a little thing. I knew.
That's really funny.
Anyway, John, thank you. I appreciate it. Those are certainly wonderful works, and I hope you're enjoying the stuff that I'm currently doing too. It's always nice when folks like things that I did at the beginning of my career, and I also like when people like things that I did yesterday.
Yeah,
I don't do as much as I used to, but that's certainly a different era.
John is also obsessed with the show Lost.
Yes. Well, I had a great time, and to give credit where credit's due, that show exists because of Damon Lindelof, who you now all know from Lanterns. He's an exceptional showrunner, storyteller. Just anything he sort of touches is kind of magical. He's written comics. He did Hulk Wolverine with Neil Yu, which is great fun. So, yeah, shout out to Damon.
Jeph, have you enjoyed the first 2 episodes of Lanterns thus far?
I have. This is the best way that I can put it. Having made, when I was at Marvel, we made 16 live action television series. Some of them were fantastic. Some of them were good. I say the same thing about every television show that I watch, which is, and it's not meant to be dismissive, it is, if you knew what it takes to make good television, you'd be surprised there's any good television. And I cannot imagine what Damon and Tom and the other gentleman whose name I'm blanking on at the moment,
Chris Mundy,
had to go through between DC, Warner Brothers, HBO Max. Like, it's sort of the reason why I don't do it anymore. It just, it's great when you're the boss, when you're the guy who gets the note, which is we think that there should be a cat in the scene. Can you put a cat in the scene? And you just go, sure, we'll put a cat in the scene, and then hope that they don't notice that there's no cat in the scene. And that doesn't mean they're bad executives. I can tell you that John, who runs FX, if you watch a show on FX, I guarantee you it's a great show. But I can tell you that because the man who runs FX is a great producer, and not an executive. I mean, he is an executive, but he doesn't think like that. He thinks like a producer. He thinks about what's best for story.
That speaks volumes to your experience with Legion.
Absolutely. Look, also, we had Noah, and if you're enjoying Fargo or you're enjoying his current show, which again, I'm blanking, Alien, sorry, Alien Earth. Noah's in the same league that I put Damon. These are guys that I could only wish that I had that kind of talent, and their abilities. It's just exceptional.
And
Shogun is another fantastic one. It just came to.
And if we had to jump back, Jeph, to the beginning of your exposure to Hollywood, do you remember about being a young writer breaking into Hollywood around the time of Teen Wolf and Commando?
Very well. And I wish I could go back and tell myself how incredibly lucky I was. I was 23 years old. I had gotten out of film school. I went to film school at Columbia University. And I moved out here, didn't know a soul. And a friend of a friend that I knew called me and said, hey, we're a small little company. And my boss just finished making a movie with Nicolas Cage, who I think at the time was Nicolas Coppola. But it could be Nicolas Cage, called Valley Girl. And we made it for $600,000, and it made $10 million. And my boss thinks that there's a business in making movies for less than $1 million. Do you have an idea for a movie that is less than $1 million? I'm on the phone, and I go, absolutely. And he goes, well, what's it about? And I said, well, it's about just my brain is like, come up with something. This is a chance. I said, he's a teenager, and he's in a small town, and he really wants to be popular. And there's a little gerbil running around in the back of my head on one of those wheels going, just whatever you can get out of Spider-Man, just take him to Spider-Man. And he's not really popular, and he's in love with the most popular girl in the school. And the girl next door is really the girl that he should be with. And he plays basketball, and he's terrible at it, but he still plays, and he doesn't really have a good relationship with his dad. And the movie opens, and they're in the middle of a basketball game, and they're losing 30-1 or whatever, and all of a sudden the ball drops and everyone piles on in order to get the ball. And this kid has the ball, and he raps, and he's a werewolf. And the guy on the phone goes, and then he kills everybody. And I go, oh, no, I forgot to tell you, it's a comedy. And he goes, oh, well, then what happens? I said, well, what you don't know is that werewolves play great basketball, like Harlem Globetrotter basketball, like flips in the air and double dunks and whatever you can imagine, he starts doing. And it's really the story of how we all hope someday to be special, but you find out that sometimes being special isn't what you thought it was going to be, and what you really need to do is to find out that you are special. You don't need to become famous for people to be able to see the special in you. You need to find that in yourself. He goes, great, I love this. This is great. I need you in my office at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. To do what? Tell me the whole story. I'm like, okay, this is 2 o'clock in the afternoon, previous day. And so in those days, I had a writing partner, Matthew Weissman, and he and I was tending bar at the American Icon TGI Fridays. He was over in a place aptly called Westworld, which was in those days when you wanted to play a video game, you went to a video arcade, and he sat behind bulletproof glass and changed dollars into quarters. And both of us called in sick and stayed up all night long and tried to think of every teen comedy and what we could do and how that could be funny with a werewolf in it. And came in the next day and told the story, and the guy goes, love it, great. Here's the thing. We only have 3 weeks, and we need Michael J. Fox. And I'm like, I barely know you. I don't know Michael J. Fox. What are you talking about? And he said, no, that's not, don't worry about that. We'll go to Michael J. Fox. We just need a script to show to him.
Woo!
So that's what we did. We both decided to quit our jobs because we just said, look, if you can always get a job that sucks, but I don't ever want to wake up in the middle of the night 40 years later, which is how long it's been, and go, I could have gotten that movie made if I wasn't so tired from making cocktails. And by the way, during that time, the Tom Cruise movie Cocktail had come out, and so we were throwing them up in the air and,
on a show
like footballs. It was a show that you put on. So both of us were exhausted all the time. But anyway, we wrote the script. We pretty much shot the first draft. And we got very lucky because when we started the show, Michael was not a big star. That's how they got him. And during the course of shooting it, he replaced, everyone knows now, he replaced Eric Stoltz. And so we were shooting simultaneously, although we only had a few days left and they had 4 or 5 weeks left, and plus a lot of reshooting. And we started getting this big buzz, the studio did, about how this Back to the Future movie was going to be a big hit. So, because we were supposed to open in April and they were going to open in May. And the smartest thing this guy ever did that ran the studio was that he moved us to August and then changed the ad campaign to Michael J. Fox is back as a werewolf, as Teen Wolf. And everybody went, well, I liked him in that. I'll go see this. And that's what happened. And then during that time, which again, knock wood, very lucky, we spec'd a movie that originally was going to be with Walter Hill directing and Nick Nolte starring in it, about a special forces guy who gave up that world so that he could live with his daughter, and his daughter gets kidnapped, and then he has to. In those days, movies that had a clock had a better chance of getting made than movies that didn't have a clock. So there was 48 hours, and there after that would come Die Hard, and there was if you could find any way of sort of going, you only have until X amount of time to solve the crime. Audiences like that, and so we came up with this idea, which was that if we put John Matrix on a plane and no one knew that he could get off the plane, and that's a different story I can tell you, that he would have until the plane landed for people to know he wasn't on the plane. Because in those days, there was no, you couldn't like call the plane or anything. You had to just accept that the guy was on the plane. And it was just a great clock. And it you were constantly cutting to the plane to go someone's going to find out that he's not on the plane, and they're going to kill his daughter. And that movie was Commando. And those movies got made sort of one right after another. And so in the summer of 1985, again, if you remember, this is sort of the birth of VHS. For the most part, if you wanted to see a movie again, you had to go to the theater. So if you were 15 years old, or you knew anyone who acted like a 15-year-old in 1985, I'm a god. Because the only thing you did that summer was you went to see Back to the Future, you went to go see Teen Wolf, and you went to go see Commando. And that's all you saw. And there was a point when Commando and Teen Wolf were in the theater at the same time, and they were the number 1 and the number 5 movie. I mean, I have a Polaroid, that's how old it is, of the marquee, and it's, Teen Wolf's there and Commando's underneath it. And, again, I had no idea. These are the first 2 movies that I wrote, and they got made. And
you're how old, Jeph?
Between 23 and 25. And
how do you control your ego at that point? You must have been insane. You must have thought you were a god at that point.
No, well, first of all, whenever you set out to tell a story, you have no idea whether or not anyone's going to care. Anyone. Mm-hmm. I mean, in fairness, when we were shooting, no one knew who Michael was. Mm-hmm. And on the flip side of that, Arnold had never been a hero before. He'd been the Terminator. So who knows? I mean, what I did know was I was fascinated by the idea that if you see Nick Nolte in 48 Hours, he's got a big gut, and in his personal life, he'd been drinking. And I sort of liked the idea of a guy who was a special forces guy who had let it all go, so that when his child had been kidnapped, you didn't know whether or not he was going to be able to get him back, whether or not he had it in him.
Right.
And when Arnold took over the part, which is how it happens in Hollywood, it wasn't a question of whether or not he was going to get his kid back. It was when was he going to get his kid back? And I can tell you it's in 88 minutes. And so the trick was just to sort of keep coming up with things that got in his way, as opposed to him having to be more of a detective kind of guy.
Okay.
And that's how it started. So for the next, when I look at my career, it sort of divides into sort of 3 really distinct parts. I did that for 20 years. And then I spent 10 years working for someone else's television show. I worked on Smallville and Buffy, and I worked on Lost, and I worked on Heroes. And then I was about to do my own show when I got a call from Marvel, and they'd been bought by Disney, and they wanted to know whether or not I would run the television division. And I think my mentor there, Dan Buckley, only picked me because I was the only guy he knew that worked in television, not because of any other reason. And I said to him, I've never run a studio before. I have no idea how to do that. I know how to make shows. He goes, well, then go make shows. And if it doesn't work, we'll fire you. And that was kind of the way that that's not a slice at Dan. That was sort of the way that I did everything. When I went into television, I remember my agent said to me, you don't know anything about television. I said, well, I watch it. And he said, no, but you don't know how to make television. I said, well, it can't be that much different than movies. And movies cost 10 times, 20, 100 times what it costs to make a television show. He said, that's not what I'm talking about. You're used to being the general. You're used to being the only writer working there. You're going to need to be part of the platoon. You're going to need to be in with all these other writers. How do you know that you can do that? And I said, well, then they'll fire me. And they didn't. I really enjoyed it. And I actually, I don't have many regrets, and I don't know that it is a regret, but I think that if I had started in television when I was 30 and not 40, I would have had a much different life. And I think I would have learned a lot more about how to make great television sooner. But then I wouldn't have run Marvel Television. I never would have been able to make Daredevil, and or be friends with Charlie and Vincent. So those are the things that matter to me more than my credits that you can look up on a computer. It's the relationships that I've made over the years and the people that I've worked with and the people that have taught me so much about, just to begin with, about storytelling, like Joss Whedon, like Damon Lindelof, like Noah, guys that could just, I could say to them, well, what if Sawyer fell in quicksand, and when he got out of the quicksand, he couldn't hear for the episode, and Damon could look at me and go, it's interesting, it's okay. Might be more interesting if it was Jack, and it might be more interesting if it wasn't quicksand, and I don't love losing the hearing, but it's the start of something. And being able to just do that while you're sitting in a room and not feel belittled at all, feeling like, well, then teach me, Obi-Wan, that's exciting to me. Al Goff and Miles Miller on Smallville had very specific things about the way the story needed to be told. That in the second act, there had to be a scene between Clark and Lex. Did not matter whether or not Clark was on the moon and Lex was in Hawaii. Figure it out. And every week we would pitch, and they would look at the board, and there would be 35 scenes on the board, and they would look at it and, where's the scene with Clark and Lex in Act 2? We'd be like, guys, Lex is in a mental institution. Clark is at home with kryptonite poison. Okay, figure out how he gets there, because that's how we make the show.
Hallucinations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I vaguely recall an episode like that, and I'm like, why is there this dream sequence with the two of them talking? And that makes so much sense now.
I don't know that that's true about those things. I do know that I don't have a lot of rules in storytelling, but one of them is no dream stories. I think that's a cheat. I do believe in what if, and I do believe in this is an imaginary story. But you tell that to the audience at the beginning, and that can be fun. But I think that if you are going to tell a story, it has to happen in the real world in real time and have a real consequence to it. I don't like, they're absolutely two of my favorite films, Superman 1 and Superman 2. I do not like that Superman kisses Lois and she forgets that he's Clark Kent. Right. Sorry, guys, that's not one of his powers. It's not don't play with people's memories. But if you do, just make sure there's a telepath somewhere in the show that can do that sort of thing. I don't mind if you can explain it. I just don't think that you can, all of a sudden, kiss somebody and they forget that have a secret identity.
These collaborations are really remarkable to talk about. And since you mentioned Smallville, you spent quite a few years on Smallville working with both Tom Welling and Michael Rosenbaum. Are there any behind-the-scenes stories of working with those two that really were sort of quintessential Superman or quintessential Lex or Clark?
Well, first of all, those guys are still my friends, and I just think they're exceptional people, just starting there. I don't think a lot of people know that Michael was more of a comedian and really sort of saw his career more like Michael Keaton than as Lex. But as we have seen, comedians, Robin Williams being the number one example, are great dramatic actors. Um, I think the fact that that show was shot in Vancouver at a time when not a lot of shows were shot in Vancouver, that they were on the cover of Rolling Stone, and they were completely unaware of it. Not only that they were on the cover, but also that they were so popular they could be on the cover of Rolling Stone, because they were in a little tiny part of Vancouver. Like, they could go into town. People didn't say anything. They would go, "Oh, those actors on that show," and that was about it. Um, you know, I remember Al once saying to me, the creator and the showrunner, saying to me how important it was in casting on television. That Aaron Spelling, and I hope I'm not misquoting him, and if I am, Al, I'm sorry. If Aaron Spelling said, there's, in those days, there were, I think, 5 television stations, and because we were on the Warner's network. And he said, you have to be able to capture the audience. This is Aaron Spelling, who had done Dynasty in Dallas and Love Boat, and they used to call ABC the Aaron Spelling Broadcast Network because he had so many shows. And according to Al, Aaron Spelling told him once that if you have a choice between a great actor or a great looking actor in television, not film, get the great looking actor, and then reconform the character to the strengths or the weaknesses of the actor. Because when people are flipping around, if they see somebody that they go, that looks like Tom Welling, or looks like Kristen Crook, or looks like Erica Durant, they're stopping to see what this is. And that's how Smallville became Smallville. It was an exceptionally well written, well produced, well acted, all those things. But there were a lot of shows that were those things. There's 200 episodes of Smallville. There were 10 seasons of Smallville. And that only happens when it all works together. And it's why now, I don't know, 20 years later, maybe more than that, they're, conventions and they have Smallville nights, and they have cruises, and they still hang out with each other. And it's a business of being Clark and Lex. But my most, like, and I say this with incredible respect to Tom. If you watch the first season, he's new to this, and you can tell that he's new to this. And he went off during the break, the hiatus between season 1 and season 2. Show's a massive hit at this point. And he came back, and something happened. And I don't ever want to know. Sometimes magic happens. He came back, and if you watch season 2, you'll notice it. He grew as an actor. He decided, this show, I'm going to put it on my back like Superman, and I'm going to carry this show for as long as it runs. And we suddenly found, he can do drama, he can do comedy, he can read pages of dialogue without taking a breath. And when something like that happens, you caught fire in a bottle. And then I have to say, I'm not going to remember anybody's name properly, but I can tell you that Mark Verheiden, who created The Mask, and Michael Green, you guys look it up, his credits are incredible, were just among the writing staff that was there. And there were young writers on that show too that had never really done very much, who would then go on to be showrunners. And we're all friends, and we all still see each other, and again, I know that doesn't sound all that spectacular. It in our business, it's really hard to do, largely because people go off and they make another show, and then they form a whole new family, and so that's their family, and then they make another show, and then that's another family that they make. I'm just reminded that we just lost Hayden Panettiere, or as I used to call her, Hayden Planetarium. And Jack Coleman, who played Horner Rimmed Glasses, who played her father on the show, just sort of out of the blue, called about 15 people and said, "Do you want to come over and we'll have dinner and we'll just hang out and just tell Hayden stories and tell stories?" And it was just this like some people I hadn't seen in 20 years. But it was like magic. Like everybody was back and we remembered things, and there wasn't anybody going, "I don't know who that is, and I don't know when that happened," and that kind of thing. And that's just luck. I'm just telling you, I can't tell you how I wound up on any of those shows. Most of the people I worked with on Buffy, I then stole and brought to Marvel. Drew Greenberg and Drew Goddard, who is probably going to win another Academy. Who wrote The Martian and wrote Hail Mary. Steve DeKnight, who would run the first season of Daredevil. Petrie, like it just. If I wanted the murderer's row of genre television, I just had to go look at who was on Buffy in the first 5 seasons.
We just saw you a couple of weeks ago, Jeph, at Terrificon. Did you get to connect with Charisma Carpenter from Buffy?
I did not. It was funny. We were about 100 yards away from each other. I could see her, and I'm assuming she could see me. But I have a big shout out to Mitch and the folks at Terrificon. It was literally nonstop from the moment that I sat down. And I'm one of those guys. If I go to a show, I'm not there to go march around and talk to folks. I don't even go to lunch. I just stay there and because I want to talk to fans. I want to make sure that they get what it costs a lot of money to go to a show. It costs a lot of time to go to a show. And if they're coming in order to get me to autograph or do a little sketch on one of their favorite comics, I want to make that the best experience that it can be for them. I don't want to be sitting there going, "Oh, look, there's Charisma. I'm going to go over and talk to her. I'll be back." So, and also, you don't know what that other person's thinking or doing, and they may have the same mind frame. Like, if someone wants to come over and chat with me that I know, I tend to try to say, "Look, can we talk at the end of the show, or can we meet up later?" Right now I'm dealing with Joe Schmeggy, who's here from Oshkosh, wherever Oshkosh is. I'm sorry to everybody that lives in Oshkosh. Don't go on Reddit and tell them I don't know where Oshkosh is. I think it's in Wisconsin.
Right. Random fan.
I really see none of that happening. But should it happen, I'm gonna be laughing a lot tomorrow morning.
I can just tell you that that person at that particular moment is more important to me than anybody that's in the show.
That's really that's a lovely sentiment, and when we are on those lines and we do get to talk to creators, like it's very nice to when you're present with us and we're sharing, even sharing like
how you found me. I mean, the man with the green hair came up and said, "Hey, can I talk to you about being on our show?" And that's how it happens. I don't even know how to pursue this. This isn't part of. I do interviews when I can, or podcasts, and I do no homework. I really should. I could be on some communist propaganda show and not even know it.
I've been accused. No, the only thing I've ever been accused of is being a dirty liberal, so you'll be fine.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I mean, however it works.
But if we switched over to comics, since now we're talking about Terrificon and comic book conventions, do you remember the first conversation you ever had with your comic book partner at that time, Tim Sale, about working together? And what do you think he understood about your writing that perhaps other artists didn't?
Well, I can tell you nothing. I can tell you, well, I have to go backwards and then I can go forwards. I was at Warner Brothers, and this is about 1988. So, and they're making, and I always get the dates wrong. So don't go on Reddit and say this guy made up a story because I got the dates wrong. I'm sorry, I'm old. But I think it's right around the time that they're making Batman Returns because they'd already made Batman. And John Peters and Peter Guber ran a company called, appropriately, Guber Peters, and they were the producers. And they were at the Warner Brothers lot, and they desperately wanted to make another hero film because they knew they couldn't just make Batman movies for the rest of their lives. And why not? Why not fill up the gas tank and see what else was there? They really wanted to make Superman. This is before the Tim Burton Nick Cage movie that they were going to make. And my best friend in the world, Stan Brooks, happened again. This is one of those things where like it's kismet. I can't explain it. He happened to be working as their head of television. And we're roughly the same age. So this is back in 1988. You do the math. And they're having a meeting and they're talking about, they should think about finding another comic book character. And my friend Stan says, well, if you're going to do that, there's a guy on the lot who has a deal at Warner Brothers who knows more about comic books than anybody on the lot. And there was no DC Studios then. It was just Jeanette Kahn was then the publisher. And if Jeanette said, sure, you could have Ambush Bug, you could make an Ambush Bug movie. And they came up with the idea that they wanted to do The Flash. So I came into the meeting and their pitch was Michael J. Fox is the Flash. And Michael J. Fox. And I was like, yeah, he's a really big star now. And when I knew him, he was happy to get the job. So, and they were like, no, but you know how to write for him. You have the voice in your head. And you made a hit movie with him. That's a good thing. And I was like, okay, great, fine. So they work out the whole deal. And in all fairness, this is before Mark Waid and Jeph Johns changed the Flash forever. And the idea of the multiverse and the idea, I know that there's a Flash of two worlds. People on Reddit, I'm sorry. But there was no, you have to give me this. There was no Speed Force. There were so many things that those two men brought to this character that at the time that I was doing it, he was just a guy who ran fast. And I also don't approach characters that way. I'm not really interested in superpowers or costumes. I'm interested in the man who's wearing the mask or the woman who's wearing the mask or the kid who's wearing the mask for that matter. It's the person who's behind the mask that's interesting to me. And I have to give credit where credit's due. Joe Quesada told me a story when we started Daredevil that he once, when he was starting to do Daredevil as a comic book, he went to Stan Lee and he said, "What's the trick?" And Stan said, "What do you mean, what's the trick?" He said, "Well, what's the trick? Why does anybody care about Daredevil?" He said, "Oh, I'll tell you the story." He goes, you go and you're walking down the street in New York City, and there's a crowd that's formed. And you go over to see why the crowd is formed, and you look up, and 11 stories above you, there's a man standing on a ledge. And the crowd is terrified. This man is going to fall. He's going to jump. He's something horrible is about to happen. And now you're in. Now you've left a little bait, a little chum in the water. People are interested in, okay, what's going to happen? He goes, now what if I told you that he's blind? And all of a sudden, everyone's in. Everyone's, what happened? What's the end of the story? Does he get back inside? Does he fall off? What happens? What's going to happen? And Joe realized it, and Joe taught me to realize that it's much more interesting to write about Bruce Banner than it is to write about the Hulk. Even though I love writing the Hulk and I love Hulk Smash more than anything else in the world, but that's part of the reason why Tim and I did Ditto Yellow and Spider-Man Blue and Hulk Gray and Cap White, because they were really about the men and what the men had lost in order to become the heroes. And more importantly, at least for me, that how important the women were that were their love interests, who, for one reason or another, were dead in the Marvel universe. Some of them are not anymore. And how unfair I thought that was. And that they were as much a reason why Peter became Spider-Man, became a better Spider-Man, was because of Gwen. Mm-hmm. And people had forgotten who Gwen was at this point. They only knew Mary Jane. Like 20 years have gone by. Now there's Spider-Gwen and a bunch of other Gwen-ness that's out there, and that's great. But it's not my Gwen. And yes, she's mine. But again, I ventured off into the wrong land. So I don't know who Barry Allen is. As far as I'm concerned, Barry Allen is a guy who can run fast, whose only character trait is that he's late. Isn't that hilarious? Funny, the fastest man in the world is late. Okay, I can do that joke twice, maybe 3 times. That's not going to fill up a 90 to 100-minute movie, ever. So came up with the idea that when he ran, because remember, it's Michael J. Fox, or at least we hoped, that he ran, his sneakers would burn out. So he had to constantly keep going to do that. And when they rebooted The Flash, that was one of the gags that they put in the Flash comic. And that he had to continually eat candy bars in order to keep his metabolism going. And again, that turned up in the comic book. That was my contribution to the world. I'm not taking anything away from anybody who worked on that comic book. Maybe they came up with it on their own. I can only tell you that that was what was in my pitch. And the guys were like, oh, it's the greatest ever. We're going to have a candy bar tie-in and a shoe tie-in, and it's going to be awesome. What's the movie? And I spent 2 months. And this is the only time it's ever happened. I quit. I went back and I said, guys, there's no movie here. I don't know what to tell you. There's no movie that I know how to write. So it was the only movie in 20 years that I ever walked away from. And I can't believe it, because I've never gotten a chance to write a superhero movie before or since. And you'd think that people would be banging down my door. But I do see my stories in other people's movies. So that's okay. Rather have to check. But the part that was interesting was a few weeks later, Jeanette Kahn calls me and says, look, if you're not going to write a movie for us, will you write a comic book for us? And for me, that was like Santa pulling up at the house in July and saying, I missed you at Christmas time, but I've got an American Express card, and we're going to go over to Toys R Us, and you have anything you want. I so much would rather write a comic than write the Flash movie. So she said, great, Dick Giordano's going to come out to California, and you're going to meet with him. And Dick at the time was not just an inker, he was vice president of DC Comics, and he'll tell you how it's done. I said, great, terrific. I go to breakfast with Dick. The only reason I go is because I'm a huge Neil Adams fan, and all I want to do is talk about Neil Adams, who was an inker on Neil Adams. And he's like, we need to find out what comic you're writing. And so I said, well, it's easy. I want to write Batman. And he said, no, we have people that write Batman. And I went, okay, well, then I'll write Superman. He goes, no, we have people that write Superman. And I had thought that it was like television, where there were different people. I mean, I read comics since I was a kid, so I knew who Roy Thomas was. I knew who Jerry Conway was. But I also knew there were fill-in issues every now and then, but I didn't really realize that there weren't, A, a lot of fill-in issues, and B, when there was a fill-in issue, it was usually by another guy who was writing somewhere else in the company. They didn't go out to find a freelancer in order to do this. There was no freelancers. It didn't exist. And I was the first guy. Some people would argue that Sam Hamm's story that's in Detective 100 something, I don't know, that he was the first guy because he'd written the Batman movie. But I was really, I'm going to state my claim, I was the first guy that was not a comic book guy that got to write a comic book. And so we went through the list. And I got to tell you guys, if you get the list, you cannot know how many characters there are that begin with the letter A in alphabetical order at DC Comics. There's the Atom, there's Aquaman, there's Ambush Bug, there's
Amazing Man.
There's Amazing Man. You got it. Okay. Every single one of those, not available. We have a writer for them. We get to the Bs. You have no idea how many Bs there are. First of all, just in Batman alone, there was a Bat Family, Batgirl, Bat this, Bat that, Bat this, Batlash. All those books. No, all of them have writers. Books that weren't even published, they had writers. And I could tell they were going to put me in the safest corner that they could, because I was this Hollywood guy. So who knows what damage I could do. So we get to the Cs, and finally we get to Challengers of the Unknown, or as I like to refer to it as, Challengers of the Unknown, which I thought would be a great radio show in the 1930s. And so, no, I'm not that one. And so they say, Dick looks at Pat was there at the time, and who was worked in the DC offices. They sort of look at each other and go, we haven't published Challenge of the Unknown since 1978. You can have Challengers of the Unknown. And I go, great. I have no idea what I've committed to. So I leave the meeting. I go to Heidi Ho Comics in Santa Monica, which I don't think is there anymore. And I say to Bob, the owner, I go, do you have something called Challengers of the Unknown? He goes, let me go in the back. I'll come back out. He comes back out with a white box. Everyone knows what a white box looks like. And he goes, I have issues 1 through 78, the entire run. And I go, okay, what's that going to set me back? And he goes, I kid you not, he goes, $5. I need $5. I was like, you need the box? Like, I don't even get the box for $5? He goes, no, I'll put it in another box. I need the box and I need the space in the back. So I'm like thinking to myself, what have I gotten myself into? And I'm, somewhere in my 30s, and I think it's a good idea because Grant Morrison, who I think I could possibly touch his coattail, is doing Animal Man, and Animal Man was at the time before was this incredibly lame character that Grant made cool. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do a story about midlife crisis because I know so much about a midlife crisis being in my 30s. Yeah. And I write a 40-page outline for an 8-issue comic. Now I need an artist. I have no idea where to go. Barbara Randall, then Barbara Kiesel, now Barbara Randall, is my editor. And we go to San Diego in the summer of 1989 and spend 4 days. San Diego is not what you think San Diego is now. It is not in the convention center. It's in the basement of the Grand Hotel. Oof. And it is basically a flea market. And then off to the side of the flea market
There is a room, and in the room are a bunch of tables that are set up where this is Artist Alley. And there's maybe 25 guys in there. And I look around the room, and I'm not being picky. I'm just trying to find somebody who's going to say yes. And I go over, and these two guys are sitting together, and I'm looking through their artwork, and they're super talented young guys. And I go, wow, you guys are super talented. And they say thank you, and I said, I'm Jeph Loeb, and I'm now like putting it on. I wrote Teen Wolf, I wrote Commando. I'm gonna write this, and we're gonna make a movie out of it, and a television series, and it's gonna be great. And you guys should read my outline, and you guys should be the guys that are the artists. And they bust out laughing, like in my face, and go, we're gonna do the X-Men. And I go, what? No, John Byrne's doing the X-Men. What are you talking about? You're never going to do the X-Men. And that's how I met Jim Lee and Will Spatasia. And the pages that I was looking at were Punisher pages. I have Rob Liefeld's tryout pages from Hawk and Dove. I did not see Rob at that time. I met Rob later in life. But for 4 days, everyone said no. And on Sunday, the last day, Barbara comes running up to me and goes, I think we found our guy. I said, why do you think it's our guy? He goes, well, first of all, he said yes. And 90% of the answer. I said, what does he do? And she hands me a graphic novel called Thieves' World, which was a black and white, 80-page graphic novel. Big size, though, the size of like Emperor Doom, if you know what Emperor Doom. It was a size that they would do graphic novels, not small like Dark Knight. And what I loved about it, it was based on a card game. And what I loved about it was that all the people looked different. They were tall, they were thin, they were the exact opposite of that. They were, the women were not voluptuous or startlingly beautiful. They looked like people. And part of the problem I had with Challenge the Unknown was that everyone looked like, in the 78 issues, even though it was created by Jack Kirby, everyone looked like Bruce Wayne. And the only way you could tell them apart was they had black hair, blue hair, brown hair, and yellow hair. Because in those days, you only had a certain number of colors that you could do. So if the colorist screwed up and they didn't say who they were talking to, I had no idea who anybody was talking to. So I thought, I got to change this. I want one guy to look like this and one guy to look like that and one guy to look like this. This is our guy. So I go to see him, and he's sitting at a table selling greeting cards. Not comics, not pages, not artwork, greeting cards that he'll make for you at the con. And the first thing out of my mouth was, I understand that you want to do the comic. And he says, yeah, it sounds great. I love comics. I've never done a superhero comic. This could be great. I said, well, what I love is that you draw really ugly people. And I did not mean it as an insult. I meant it as, like, I like the idea that you draw ugly people. There's ugly people in the world, myself included. And it was something to his last days, he never forgave me for. and we were very different guys around the same age, but we loved the same music. I could quote movies, and he got it all the time, but he loved baseball, and I couldn't care less. Sorry if you're a baseball fan. I don't mean to offend you. Please don't go on Reddit and say I don't like baseball. It's a great game. It's the American pastime. And we just became really good friends. But I had no idea how to write a comic. And so what I would do is, and of course we didn't have enough money in order to have a fax machine. So he and I would talk on the phone like teenage girls for like 3 to 5 hours about the next 3 pages of the story. It never occurred to us to make an outline. It never occurred to us to like know where we're going. Nothing. Just the next 3 pages. And I would say, this is what happened in panel 1, this is and then panel 2, and then panel 3. And he would write it all down, and then he would draw the pages, go to Kinko's when there was a Kinko's, put it in a FedEx, and send it to me. I didn't think he said it. I think he just mailed it to me from Seattle. And about 3 days later, it never occurred to me to pick up the phone and go, we should work on the next 3 pages. So he was doing nothing during that time. These pages would show up, and I would call him, and I would go, I love it. It's great. It's terrific. It's the best thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm so lucky to be working with you. Page 1, panel 2. I really kind of saw this as a close-up. And when I talked to you about it, I said it was a close-up. And when I mean a close-up, I mean like a squeaker, like this, like his forehead and his chin. That's what I'm thinking that we're supposed to be looking at. I'm not thinking that we're supposed to be seeing. And what he had drawn, what Tim often drew, was the entire store with little tiny things on the shelves and books and a cash register and all this stuff, none of which I cared about. I just wanted the guy's face. And so I said to him, could you push the camera in and just give me a close-up? And then we're done. We'll go on to the next 3 pages. And he goes, what camera? And I go, I don't know. Don't you have just blow it up. Put it on a thing. I don't know how it works. He goes, you're asking me to redraw the page. And I said, yeah, I guess I am. Is that hard? And so I can tell you, because I have them, the book was 22 pages long. I have 64 pages of the same issue because he just kept redrawing the pages because I kept saying, this isn't what I had in mind. Now, mind you, I could have written it down. I could have done a lot of things to solve the problem, but I didn't. And so when we got to issue 2, I said, I love it. It's terrific. On page 2, he goes, nope. What you have is what's going to the printer. And I went, oh, okay. My partner has now joined the game. I understand. Not a problem. And then it was totally Tim. He went off and did Legends of the Dark Knight for Archie Goodwin and James Robinson. And they did The Adventures of the Cavalier, a character that only existed in that story. And the whole idea behind Legends of the Dark Knight was that Archie told DC that no one would ever repeat. This was an opportunity for people who never worked on Batman, could work on Batman for 1 issue, 3 issues, 5 issues, whatever they wanted, but then they had to go back to whatever job they had. And it was an opportunity for artists, particularly who would never get a chance to draw Batman, to do this. And Archie and Tim had become friends during the Cavalier story, and Archie said, I want you to do another one. It was like an honor. First of all, Archie Goodwin is the Damon Lindelof of editors and writers, and it's just a genius, just the best at everything. And Tim, for I do not know to this day, said, I'll do it, but can Jeph Loeb write it? This is a guy who I tortured for 2 years on Challenger on the Unknown. And now he wants to do Batman with me.
For 8 issues, 2 years of torture.
Exactly. And I get a call from Archie, and he says, do you want to do Batman? And I'm like, yeah. And that was the first Halloween special. And that's how Tim and I started working together. And then it just became, at that time, I don't know that it is this way anymore, but at that time, it was the kind of thing where people called and said, do you two guys what do you guys want to do? And then you would tell them, and then they would go, well, what if it was in here? This was long before, neither one of us was going to do a monthly comic. That wasn't going to happen. And so we did the Halloween specials for 3 years, and then Archie came up with this idea that we do something that was for a year. And that's it's, again, a much longer story, but that's what became The Long Halloween. And it's so funny because when we were doing The Long Halloween, getting back to your question about did I know when we were making those movies that they were going to be sort of iconic films. I remember that Wizard Magazine was going to do an article about The Long Halloween, and I was terrified because I just kept thinking, we're doing a murder mystery with a guy that no one knows who kills criminals that no one knows. It's not like he's shooting the Joker. And is anybody going to care? I mean, I knew I had a great story and a Two-Face story, but that wasn't my story. I was just expanding on a story that everybody already knew. I got to do more Harvey Dent than I think anybody had ever done up until that point. So, and I got to bring Gilda into the story and make her a character, and that was fun. But no one's buying Batman because Gilda Dent's in it. Well, I hope that the rumor is true that Scarlett Johansson's playing the part. But I don't know that, so don't quote me. And don't go on Reddit and say that I know something. I know nothing. So I was so terrified that if you go back and you look at the April Fool's issue of Long Halloween, half the story is Batman telling who he thinks the killer is, and the other half of the story is the Riddler saying who he thinks the story is, because it was 6 months after we started. And I thought, I have to remind the reader, what the hell is this about? Like, I don't think anybody cares who the holiday killer is. And
I mean, I do, but
well, yes, but even at that time, and Wizard did this magazine, and they had their guesses, and they did a casting. They were really sort of very good about promoting. There wasn't any way to promote it. There was no social media, none of that. But a lot of people are surprised when I tell them we never outsold Batman. We 1 month outsold Detective. But for the most part, we were a reasonably well-selling book. And then they collected it. And it blew up. And to this day, that there is a Long Halloween every quarter that DC puts a new cover on. They have a different size, different shape, a different something. And now that we have Dark Victory and Catwoman in Rome and Last Halloween, and we took the Halloween specials and we made those the prequels, it's now like its own little library. But when Tim and I were doing it, it was like a job. It was just like, this is what we're going to do, and this is the way that we were going to talk about it. And I'm always astonished when people talk about the Halloween from the mystery side of it, because it's a pretty good mystery. I just didn't know that anybody was going to care. I thought all anybody was going to care about was what happened to poor Harvey Dent.
no, I think this is a rich. Even if you didn't see it, what it became, it just became this rich mythos that led into Harvey Dent, right? And like, it's just the revelation. I mean, are we spoiling it for anybody if I talk about who Holiday is?
Well, if you can figure out who Holiday is, then you're better than most people that come up to me at the convention who still to this day can't figure out who Holiday is. But the nice part about it is enough people. During that time, there was no way. I mean, I think there were message boards, but
Yes,
mostly there were letters, and people would write in and say, "This is who I think it is." And I got enough letters that said, "Because this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened, this is why I think it's this." And I went, "Well, then I laid the breadcrumbs properly. I actually did it because someone figured it out." But I meet him every time I go to a con. Someone will come up to me and goes, "So, who's Holiday?" And I go, "It's there."
Is it the beauty of multiple people were Holiday?
I never commit in any way. What I want is for the reader to be able to understand that you got to read the story in order to find out what happens along the way. Now, again, I was so scared of it that in Dark Victory, Sophia was the hangman. You caught her, you hanged her. That was the end of the story. Like, there was no mystery. And what's funny is, because of that, Dark Victory is mostly remembered as the story of Bruce and Dick, the emotion of the story, which is the exact opposite of what happened with Long Halloween. I thought Long Halloween was going to be, this is the story of how Batman and Harvey Dent are no longer friends, and turns out to be this mystery that everybody needs to read. Dark Victory, which I thought was, okay, now I'm going to tell you who the killer is. Everyone went, no, I'd rather read the story about what happened at Bruce and Dick. And again, so to answer the original question, which is, no, to this day, I don't know. We just finished doing X-Men of Apocalypse with Simona Di Meo, who is, like, in my mind, the new Joe Mad, and hopefully they finally gave him an issue of Spider-Man, and I think when people start seeing him on Spider-Man, that book's just going to blow up. So to all of you out there that are collecting comics or speculating on comics, when Simona Di Meo does his issue of Spider-Man, buy 100 copies, because that is going to be the book. Because eventually he's going to be, I mean, I don't have this on any authority, I'm making this up. It's Steve Wacker's decision. But eventually he's going to be one of the great Spider-Man artists. And everyone's going to go, what's the first issue that he did? And you're going to be the one that owned it, because Jeph Loeb told it.
Nice.
And I mean, about Age of Apocalypse is one of my all-time favorites. I love Simone Di Meo, and he will be an excellent reason for me to dip my toe back into Amazing Spider-Man.
I can tell you that we had so much fun doing the Age of Apocalypse guys, and I knew we had one thing, and that was the way that it ends, which is not spoiling it for anybody. But I had always had I was lucky enough to be part of the group that was in the original Age of Apocalypse. I give credit where credit's due. The main architect of that story was Scott Lobdell, and anything that good came out of it was because of Scotty. And I was lucky enough to be able to create X-Man, and I was lucky enough to have a lot of fun with those characters.
X-Men. My friend Paul, Power of X-Men. It might be the leader of the Nate Gray X-Men fan club.
I can tell you that there are people who have a love for Nate Gray that's, in my opinion, unreasonable. But I'm just teasing. I'm glad the creator, like that and sort of the Red Hulk are the ones that I can point to and go, yeah, those are mine. Someone told me this is what we need, and I went, well, what about this? And that's what we did. Because a lot of my stories, I'm the first one to admit, I love telling stories that take place in between the pages of the stories that you already know. I'm not the guy to go to and go, we need you in a monthly book that revitalizes this book. I mean, I did it, I was on Superman for 3 years. I was on Cable for 3 years. I was on X-Force for 3 years, not consecutively. I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I kept up with that schedule, because I was working. I had a full-time job working on a television series, which is an 18-hour day. I don't know when I was writing. But I can tell you that when we got to the end of the Age of Apocalypse, I said, so let me understand something. When we come back and the world flips back around again, it was like a dream. And Bob Harris, who was the editor, said, yeah. And I went, no, when we talked about it earlier, that's the worst kind of storytelling. Like, the Age of Apocalypse can't be a dream. It had to have been something that happened, which means that the people that went there have to remember it, and it has to affect them emotionally. And he was like, no, Jeph, look, we've already been writing this stuff for months. You can't come in now. And I was like, look, Bob, I'm telling you, we had the biggest thing that happened since Jim Lee. We invented Joe Mad. Like, stop. Look what you have. And he went, fine. you can have X-Men. We'll bring X-Men over to our universe, and that'll be proof that it really happened. And you can have Sugar Man, and you can have like two other Nemesis for an hour and a half. And I was like, it was just a bad taste in my mouth all the time. So cut to 2 years ago, I get a phone call from CB, and he says to me, I hear you have unfinished business with the X-Men office. I said, I do not have unfinished business with the X-Men office. I don't think about the X-Men. I don't care about the X-Men. Sorry if you're an X-Men fan. I'm sure it's the greatest comic that's ever lived. My X-Men are the X-Men that I worked on, and John Byrne and Chris Claremont. Those are my X-Men. If you're a Dave Cockrum fan, I love you too. And if you're a Paul Smith fan, I love you too. And if you're a Steranko fan, I love you too. And if you're a Neil Adams fan, I can be here all day. I know my X-Men. But what I can tell you is that when the Age of Apocalypse ended, the ending that I fought and almost got fired for was, I said, I think that when it flips back, it should look like a Rubik's Cube, except one side of the Rubik's Cube is all red, except there's one yellow box. And no one notices for a year. Because the X-Men is never better than when there's a secret. And Bob's response was, we don't make Rubik's Cubes, we make comics. And I went, okay, you missed the metaphor completely. I'll explain it to you. They wake up, and our Scott Summers is their Scott Summers. Because no one at that point, since then, there's been lots of work done to Scott. He's everybody's favorite character. Don't write to me on Reddit about how I love Cyclops. It wasn't true then. He was the weakest character in the group. But in Age of Apocalypse, he was total badass. And I thought, we'll give him a haircut. We'll put the red glasses on him so people don't know that he only has one eye. And for a year, it'll be this mystery as to when this killer, he was a killer, is going to be discovered. I thought it was a great story. And I had Scott's support and a couple other people, and Bob was just like, that's never going to happen. And I was like, okay, well then there's no point, which is, if you go back in time and you look at the fact that I left X-Man at the end of 5 issues, and I shortly after that left Cable and left X-Force, that was it. That was the fight. And so when CB called and said, do you have finished business? I said, everyone that was in that group is gone. I don't even know who the editor is. And so he said, well, what if you could tell that story now? And I said, who's the editor? And he said, Tom Brevoort. I said, I love Tom. Known Tom for 30 years. Let's talk to Tom. Call Tom. We have this whole conversation. And he says, well, you kind of have a big problem because you're going to leave and you're not going to deal with the mess that you've created by flipping the characters. And I said, yeah, that's the idea. I'm giving you a card and you can do whatever you want with it. If you want to do it, listen, the reason why Hush works is because, and spoiler alert, if you haven't read Hush, shame on you. The Riddler figured out that Bruce Wayne was Batman. Or Batman was Bruce Wayne, whatever you want. And I wanted to do that because every time I had written the Riddler, I'd always kind of made him a punching bag. And I thought, this guy is actually the smartest guy in the DCU. He should be able to figure that out. What is the greatest riddle? Who is Batman? He figured it out. That's a great thing. Mm-hmm. And because it was a massive hit, everyone went, great, we'll do that. We'll let you change continuity forever. And about a year later, the new writer, who I do not know, I don't even know where it happened. I never read the story. I was just told when we started Hush 2, by the way, the Riddler has amnesia and doesn't know that Bruce is Batman. And I went, yeah, I got news for you. He's so smart, he's been pretending. And so when you read Hush 2 and he suddenly knows everyone's identity, it's because he's that smart. So
if it makes you feel any better, they kept him remembering for a while, and even tried to give him an anti-hero arc,
well,
and then the amnesia.
so all I can tell you is we had this conversation, and I'm pushing for Cyclops. I am trying whatever I can, and we now have Simone DeMeo, and he loves Cyclops, and he wants to draw this thing, and it just became I'm sitting with Dick Giordano. Tom Brevoort is saying to me, you can't have Cyclops. Can I have Storm? No. Can I have Wolverine? No. Can I have Colossus? No. And finally, I said, can I have Gambit? You can have Gambit. They said, okay, so when it flips, our Gambit's going to go there, and this Gambit's going to come here. And that's going to create all kinds of problems because he and Rogue are married. And so she's going to be able to figure it out in about 14 seconds. But
that Gambit is going to get the opportunity to have everything he never had in his world.
And that's all I really cared about. And whatever that meant, and whoever was going to do that, that was somebody else's problem. But the hero of the story was Gail Simone, because it was her book who had Gambit. So, and had Rogue. And her first reaction was, I don't know how to do the story because Rogue is going to blow it up in the first 5 minutes, and Gambit's going to get his butt kicked, and that's going to be the end of the story. I said, well, think about it. And a couple of weeks later, she called back and she said, I got it. I know what I want to do. And you can have Gambit. And we flipped. And there's a new book called Gambit Gone with someone Mayo cover. And they're off the races. And that's how that book happened. And that's what I've been doing in comics, if you want to know what I've been doing recently.
Thank you, Zach, for acknowledging my sneeze in the comments. God, there are so many questions I have. There's so many things that you've done. Okay, so my favorite, one of my favorites, I have many favorites of your works, was the Superman Batman era, right?
It was an exceptional time. It was, again, all I kept getting told was World Finest doesn't work. Nobody cares. This is going to be a gigantic flop.
Oh no!
And your first arc is with Ed McGuinness, who you've been on Superman with for 3 years. It's not like anyone's going to go, wow, this is a revelation. Look at the guys from Superman are doing Superman and Batman. Ooh, whoop-de-doo.
I loved all of it.
And
all of it.
And I said, you don't understand. I'm going to tear a page out of Legends of the Dark Knight, and we're going to go get the best artists that are working in the business to do 6-issue arcs. And I'm going to write issue 3 when I'm writing issue 8, while I'm writing issue 16, so that the whole book will be done before the first issue comes out. Not exactly what happened, but we got pretty close. And I don't know what happened. We were on Superman for 3 years. Nobody gave a poop. And suddenly we were on Superman Batman, and everyone was going, did you know Lex Luthor's the president? I was like, yeah.
I loved everything in Superman. Lex becoming president, the battle with Ra's al Ghul, where he was like, no, the Earth is choosing you as its champion, not me. You know?
Then the thing that made all the difference in the world was Michael Turner on Supergirl. It was like, Supergirl was not a character that existed. I can't believe that's what was going on. No disrespect to anybody, but John Byrne had taken her out of continuity. Peter David had fought as hard as he could to try to do it, but at that particular point, she was, I kid you not, go back and look at it, she was an ectoplasmic being from another dimension who had bonded with an angel. That's not
an Earthborn angel, but after she bonded with a human, and then she separated into her angel form. Then he's like, well, I've got Linda, so Linda will be like lower power level, but let's also grab in classic Supergirl. Oh, maybe I can have Power Girl join them and do some kind of Birds of Prey women. Oh no, you won't let me do that. Oh, you're canceling my series at 75. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was there for all of it, and I was on the message boards.
And all I can tell you is
that wasn't my Supergirl. My Supergirl was a 17-year-old girl who came from Krypton, and it was Superman's cousin. And the only thing that I thought was interesting was, which you see in the movie, which is that she was 17, which meant she didn't really like the fact that her cousin was this 30-year-old human stick in the mud. And she was going to be kind of a big pain in the ass. And because she'd been exposed to the yellow sun for all those years, because it took a long time to get here, she was really more powerful than Superman was. And they went insane. They were like, this is the greatest thing we've ever heard of in our lives. And I said, and we need to bring in Wonder Woman. And I think Wonder Woman is the one who's going to train her, and we're going to create a new friendship there. And Michael Turner is going to draw the absolute bejesus out of this. And he did. And the book blew up. Like, we were in outer space. We went past the sun. And then Carlos Pacheco, who can draw anything, I said, what do you want to do? He goes, I want to draw every character in the DC universe.
Yeah.
And I said, no, Carlos, seriously, what is it you want to do? He said, I want to draw every character in the DC universe. I love all of them. I said, well, then we have to do a time travel story, because he goes, I remember the day he said to me, he goes, I want to draw Cinnamon. And I go, what? He goes, I want to draw Cinnamon. He's Spanish. I'm doing a bad accent. And I said, I don't know what you're saying, and I don't know who Cinnamon is. He goes, how do you not know who Cinnamon is? How do you not know the great Western heroes of the DC universe? Batlash, and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to do them. And I want to draw Commandy, and I want to draw the Legion of Superheroes. And they're all in there. And it just started with this crazy idea that I had, which was, because I love the adult Legion of Supervillains. I just thought that was cool.
I'm a huge fan of Paul Levitz on that. Okay, once again, there are 3 super chats from Matt, from Drew, from Garfwong. Drew has a question for you. So first, I want to thank them really quick.
Okay.
And I want to get to Drew's question. Absolutely love Sam Alexander as Nova. A great all ages introduction to the cosmic side of Marvel. Any urge to revisit the character?
I would revisit the character if Ed McGuinness was with me. Again, that was one of those weird things. It was, I got a call from Dan Buckley, who said to me, and I'm sorry, I know there are Richard Rider fans out there, and I, great. You go be a Richard Rider fan. Super. I can tell you that regardless of what you find online, they don't cancel books that are hit books. Okay? Nobody does that. So they canceled Guardians of the Galaxy, and they canceled Nova. And what I learned at the time was that whenever you kill a character or you cancel a book, that's someone's favorite character. And they will then make it their lives work to make sure that you know that no matter what you're doing, it's wrong. And I didn't ever say I didn't like Rich Rider. I never said Rich Rider can't come back. I didn't say any of those things. I just said this is another member of the Nova Corps. And not only that, they were like a special ops unit. So everything that happened with Rich happened. This was a group of people that Rich maybe didn't even know existed. But they wanted me to do something because they didn't have a lot of kid heroes that weren't sidekicks. And everyone says you wrote it because you wrote it for his son. No, he's named after my son. And just his first name, and his last name is Alexander, because originally I wanted to call him Armstrong, because there's a radio hero of Jack Armstrong, the Great American Boy, and legal came back and went, you can't call him Armstrong. And I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So my friend, and they kept saying, it's Rich Rider, it's Peter Parker, it's Bruce Banner, it's Sam And I as a joke, I said, Spade, like, because he's the Humphrey Bogart detective. And they went, like that, but not that. Come up with something else. And I went, look, I like Alexander because I like the idea of Alexander the Great. The real reason was because one of my best friends is Jesse Alexander. And I was with Jesse at the time, and I went, I'm just going to name this character after you. So it's really named after that. And if you read the first 6 issues and the introduction to what it has nothing to do about a father who lost a son. It's the story of a son who lost his father. And it really was a story about my relationship with my dad. So I'm always fascinated when people go, oh, I don't read Noah because that's just Jeph Loeb trying to work on his grief issues. And I'm like, then you clearly haven't read it because it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the guy. It has more to do with Teen Wolf than it does to do with that I lost my son. It's about a guy who thinks that his dad was a jerk. By the way, his dad was a jerk, who learns by the end of it that his dad is still alive somewhere out there in the galaxy. But I got to have lots of fun. I got to have Ed McGuinness draw the Guardians of the Galaxy, and his Gamora and his Rocket Raccoon are just the coolest things in the world. And I'll go now 2 hours ago because we gotta wrap this up because I don't think anyone's ever going to listen to this.
Oh, they will.
What I can tell you is that you asked me, was Tim aware of how I work with artists? And the answer is no, he didn't, because I had never worked with an artist before, as the story I told you. But I think the question that you're actually asking me is, how do I work with artists? And this is a story I tell all the time, which is I had just done Challenge the Unknown. And I got a phone call from a guy who's doing a book, which is called Comic Book Writers on Comic Book Writing. It's published by Titan Books. And it came out in the early 90s. I don't know if it's still published. I don't know anything about it. It's got a blue cover with white letters. That's all I know. And in it, this guy calls me up and he goes, I've got Alan Moore, and I've got Neil Gaiman, and I've got Grant Morrison, and I've got Mark Waid. And I go, yeah, what's this got to do with me? He goes, I want you to be one of the guys. I said, no, did you not just hear what you said? You're talking about guys that invented the business as it is now. This is the second generation. If I'm lucky, I'll be the 5th generation. He goes, no, I think it's going to be interesting. Like, you're the guy who is just starting out. So I can ask you questions of what it's like to just start out. You're not a veteran. And I went, this is a disaster. But you know what? Who's going to buy a book called Comic Book Writing on Comic Book Writers, or whatever it's called? And the first question he asked me was, who do you write for? And I said, I thought it was a trick question. I said, I don't understand the question. He said, when you sit down to write, who do you write for? Who's in your mind? And I was like, the artist. And he goes, interesting. And I go, why? What did anybody else say? Now, I don't know whether or not any of these other people said this. This is what the guy said to me. So if Mark Waid, you're listening to this, do not punch a hole in your computer. Do not try to run me off the road. I don't know that you ever said this. I am just repeating the story. And he said, well, most people said the fans. And I said, I don't know if I can say this, but I said, that's a bullshit answer, because you can't get 2 fans to agree on anything, which is the better Nova. You'll be here tomorrow morning. So who are you writing for? And by the way, like, if somebody says, I don't like Spider-Man, and then suddenly Simona Di Meo's on the book, now Spider-Man's their favorite character, what happened to all that I don't like Spider-Man? It went away. So you're not writing for the fans. So give me the other answer. He said, well, it's the obvious one. They're writing for themselves. They have a story that they want to tell. And so I said, oh, so they're basically an architect who gives the blueprints to a builder. And when the builder says,
maybe you want to move the door over about 3 feet, put a window here. The architect says, if that's the way I wanted it, I would have drawn the plans that way. Just draw the script. That's what I want you to do. I looked at it because I came from the world of movies and television. And in movies and television, depending upon who you're working with, I'm trying to write the best script for the directors and the actors. Because I would not write the same movie for Michael J. Fox that I would write for Tom Cruise. Both great, huge, giant stars, great actors, everything. They have a different set of tools, a different toolkit. You need to be able to know the difference between Tom Hanks and any other Tom. So if you're going to do this, first thing I do, which is why I tend to work with the same people over and over again, it's just easier. But when you're starting out, you work with people that you don't know. I brought Ed McGuinness into the business. But when I got to work with Jim Lee, he was Jim Lee. So it was a very different conversation. And you usually spend like the first 2 weeks just on the phone, not talking about the story. Just tell me, who do you look at? What do you like? What excites you? Because I know this for a fact. As a writer, it's me in the box. The thing that I am talking to you on right now is my computer. There's nobody else. It's just me in the box. And I got to finish that story in order to meet my deadline. And I don't have anybody here. I don't have anybody to go, does this work? Does this make any sense to you? I don't know. I could call my editor, but that's not going to get it done. It's just me in the box. So once I turn the script in, it goes to the artist. And if the artist reads it and the first panel says, 10,000 Romans come over the hill, the artist is going to take that script and go, I'm not doing that. I'll do something else, but I ain't doing that. So they can call me and they can go, are you kidding me? Now, if I gave that to Tim, Tim would draw a little squiggly line right up at the top and a couple of spears, and he would black it all out with ink and go, there you go, there's your Romans. If I gave that to Jim, Jim would draw 10,000 Romans, and all of the armor would have to be exactly perfectly done, which is why I don't write 10,000 Romans. But everybody had their own little thing. Like, it'd be like, doing a Michael Turner story where the women aren't the main characters. It doesn't make any sense. This is his strength. Lean into his strength. And so I think if I've gotten any kind of credibility, whatever, what artists say to me is, I feel like you wrote this script for me. And I go, I did. In fact, I stop in the middle of the script and I go, David, part of the reason why I want to do this is because when you did that 4-panel page in whatever, I thought it was one of the best things you ever drew. Let's do that here. Or, Jerry, when you told me that you really liked The Godfather, I thought, okay, well then, let's do some stuff in The Godfather. Let's give you a chance to draw the things that you love. And then, just everybody knows that I'm not a saint, Tim would say to me, I can't draw cars. Don't put a car in the story. That's just not going to happen. I'm not going to draw it. I draw bad cars. If you go back and you flip through, there are over 1,000 pages of the Long Halloween Saga. There's maybe 5 that have cars in them because I was determined to just mess with it. I just go, there's a car in the scene, and you're going to have to draw it. It would literally say that in the script. I know you hate me. I need you to draw a car in the script. And then he would write back to me, well, you have to show me exactly what his car looks like. Like every side, every angle. I need everything. I need to know everything. And then, just to mess back with me, he would draw a tire and a piece of a fender in the corner of the pantry. Right there. And I can't say it isn't there. Now, the flip side of that story is I'm working on Hush, second issue. I happen to love Huntress. I don't know why. I just think she's
Elena.
cool. And I say to Jim, what's anybody doing with Huntress? He goes, nothing. I said, great, let's make her cool. You redesign the costume, that's your department. I don't care what she's wearing. She's going to look incredible because you draw. But let's give her a bat cycle. Let's give her a Huntress cycle. Nobody's ever put her on a motorcycle. Let's do that. And I know somewhere someone's going to go, well, that's not true. In Brave and the Bold 167, she's on a motorcycle. You're wrong. Great, fine, whatever. This is what I told Jim. Jim draws a full-page splash of her on a bike appearing. Calls me up after I see it. He says, this is unbelievable. It's beautiful. I love the bike. I love her. It's great. He goes, and it works. And I go, well, of course it works. You drew it. It's a great page. He goes, no, it works. I go, Jim, I don't know what you're saying to me. You pretend I don't understand English. What do you mean it works? He goes, if you take that motorcycle and you make a 3D copy of it and you take it to an engineer and a mechanic, they will tell you that motorcycle works. You can build a motorcycle off that image. And that's the difference between these two guys. And those are just two guys that I've worked with. And that's why I can honestly say that even though the Dale Keown issue of Superman that's got crypto, which I wrote for Ed, with that exception, and I'm not dissing anybody that I've worked with. I think everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses, and this is my fault, not their fault. Anytime I was given a fill-in issue, it's the worst thing that I did. If I was on a monthly book and I got handed and I didn't know it was coming, and I got handed, they would just say to me, well, Joe Schmiercase is going to draw this issue. Or worse, Ed's late, so we need 5 pages that are going to be done by Joe Schmiercase. And I would go, this book is going to be collected someday, and people are going to get to these pages and go, what happened here? And it's not because the artist is good or bad. It's because I wrote a part for Tom Hanks. I did not write a part for Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so the artist drew the best page that he could draw based on the fact that the script that was for Ed McGuinness was now, and I'm sure someone now is flipping through some book and trying to find out who I'm dissing. I'm not dissing anybody because it happened a bunch of times. But it is part of the reason why I don't do monthly, because I'm like, guys, I just need to work with one guy. And I just need to understand that guy. Simone DeMeo was a big risk for me. Like I didn't really know Simone as a person. I hadn't broken anybody in a long time. I worked, I was the guy that worked with Jim Lee. I was the guy that, my fans on Reddit go, he sucks, but he works for the best artists, so that's why I buy the comics. Like, great, it's whatever. You have to understand that artist did not just decide to sit down one day and draw a comic. He was given a script that described every single thing that's on that page, and that dialogue is also there.
Well, Jeff, we have great respect for the written word that you have done, and you are clearly have given a lot of credit tonight to all your collaborators. And you've been very generous with your time, so we really appreciate it. But I did want to sneak in one more question if I could.
Go ahead.
All right, so let's talk about For All Seasons. Now, James Gunn has talked vocally about Superman For All Seasons being an influence on the most recent Superman film.
James Gunn at the premiere came up to me. I'd never met James before in my life. Came up to me, didn't know who I was. It was like one of those, all night long he's meetings. This is Ed Schmiercase. This is Bob Schmiercase. And then finally Jeph Loeb. And he goes, oh, Grace, nice to meet you. Jeph Loeb! And he looks at me and he goes, I want you to know that you were my angel on my shoulder. I could not have made this movie without you, and that you were on my mind every single day. And I said, James, You don't have to say that. Like, no one's here. There's no microphone. It's just you and me talking. Like, but it's an incredibly kind thing to say. I still give credit to Tim, but it's just how I'm built. But anyway, I cut you off.
Did you see your emotional beats in that film? You and Tim's?
What I saw was I actually had Tom King explain it to me, because I was used to when Christopher Nolan did the Dark Knight trilogy, there were scenes there that I recognized. And then when Matt Reeves did the Batman, there was dialogue there that I recognized. And that's very different than what James was doing. What James was doing was he understood the emotion of what was going on. And I believe that, at least this is what Tom explained to me, was he goes, how could you not see it? His Clark was your Clark. He wasn't a Clark that was George Reeves or Christopher Reeves or anybody. He was the character that's in for all seasons. And then he made a story with that. But, you know, I saw Mom, Pa, and I saw the farm, and I saw a bunch of stuff that I went, yeah, I could sort of see that. It's nice of him to do that. But those are another stories. And I appreciate it. I can tell you that it's probably my favorite thing that Tim did. And I can also tell you that another classic case, terrifying, absolutely terrifying. We have a 48-page book that comes out, the first issue that everyone loves. And I'm not bragging, I'm just saying. And it's the day before it's in the stores. I'm not talking about we're turning it in. I'm talking about it's printed and going to be in the stores. I called Tim in an absolute panic. And I said, we have made a gigantic mistake. And he said, what do you mean? I said, Superman is not in the first 47 pages of the story. He appears on the last page.
Oof.
And he's not punching anybody. He just says, my mom made it for me. That's it. That's his line. He's the star. And we didn't give him anything to do for the first 47 minutes of the movie. He goes, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I think we should throw out, he was working on issue 3. And I said, I think we should throw out issue 3. And I think the first 24 pages should be him fighting everyone in the Rogues Gallery. From Brainiac to Bizarro to everybody. Just punch, 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 punch. We just suddenly, remember this book used to be called Action Comics. We're not doing action. We're doing quiet, Smallville, boring. We're going to die. And Tim, to his credit, goes, why don't we see what people think after they've read it? And Jim Hanley at, I think it's called Universe Comics, something like that, was in New York City. It was sort of the Midtown Comics of its day. I don't know how I heard the story. He put the book on the counter and said, read the comic that made Jim Hanley cry. Oh. That was how he sold it. So I called. I don't know Jim Hanley. I don't know this store. I don't know anything. I just called and I said, I just want to say thank you. That's an incredible thing to say. And he and I talked for like an hour, and he got it. Completely understood what we were trying to do. And I thought, no one is going to get this. There isn't a person on the planet that's going to get this. All they're going to do is say, I spent $4.95, which then was like, it was supposed to be the Dark Knight Returns. Like, that's what you spent $4.95 for. You didn't spend $4.95 to see Pa Kent and Clark standing looking at a sunset. That's not comics. Well, guess what, Jeph? It is comics. And it's damn good comics, because when they're drawn by Timmy and they're beautifully painted by Bjorna, you wind up with something that will be in print long after I'm gone. And that, to me, is the greatest gift of all, is that it's not like that at Marvel. Marvel will be much more selective, but DC is very good about what they call their evergreens, and I'm very lucky that Long Halloween, Hush, Superman from All Seasons. I'm sure there are others. Superman, Batman.
I will always love your Superman and Superman's enemy, Lois Lane, one of my favorite storylines.
Again, you know why that story works? That story works because I was the new guy on Superman. And everyone thought I was going to get them to divorce. And that's why no one, not a letter, not a message board, no one said that's not Lois. Everyone said Jeph Loeb's going to get them divorced. And I went,
That is so funny.
Works.
I remember reading it and going, something's wrong with Lois, or someone's impersonating Lois. And like, I still enjoyed the reveal very much. And I like how you use the trick of giving the hint of who it could be right there in chapter 2, right? But so much is going on, you're kind of distracted from what could have just taken place.
And I can go to the other place, which is, and this always makes me laugh, Parasite never was a shapeshifter.
Right, but he came in contact with one.
And so that's how we did it. We just went, okay, this is what we're going to do.
I loved it.
I'm so glad. It's one of my favorite stories. I probably said that about every single thing I've written, but what I can tell you is you just don't. At least I don't. I don't know. Every time, every script I've written, every movie I've written, every television show I've worked on, every comic that I've done, if you ask me the day before anyone has read it, it's on the air or it's in the movie theater, I will tell you, it is the greatest failure of my career. It is the flop of the century. There is no one who is going to enjoy this, except me. And it's worked out more times than not. And there's some things that I've done that I'm really, really proud of. I'll step right into it. I know there's a very vocal faction out there that thinks that Ultimatum is the crime of the century. And I can tell you two things. One, Marvel Comics came to me and said, you can do anything you want. We just want you to answer a question. If the villains knew the world was going to end, how would they behave? He said, they'd kill everybody. He said, then that's how they're going to behave. And two, I don't care what you think of my script. I don't care what you think of the story. Dave Finch drew the shit out of a 6-issue story that had every single character in the Ultimate Universe. And all anybody wants to talk about is how Blob bit off the Wasp's head. It's the most horrific thing they've ever seen in their entire life. When I can tell you that if you turn on the television tonight, what's going on in Nepal is 90 billion times worse than what happened to the Blob in a universe that doesn't exist in a comic book. But people are going to believe what they're going to believe. But I can tell you this. One, those books stayed in the top, some of them in the top 1, but in the top 5, the entire 6 issues. There was no drop off at all. And two, when I go to a con and I sit next to Dave Finch, it's always selling. And so that means, well, you know what, guys? You didn't find these in the garbage. You've had them in your collection for 20 years. And I can tell you this, they just blew up the Ultimate Universe. And near as I can tell, go ahead, Reddit, tell me I'm wrong. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And it's Jonathan Hickman, who's one of the prophets of our business. I did it, and to this day, people talk about it. But that was my last rant of the evening. I didn't want everything to be, because we started this, you said, we're going to be mostly positive. I just wanted to go to that place because it just cracks me up, which is if you hate
ultimatum, good for you.
Do you
I'll
think?
bet you own a copy of it though.
Do you think it would have been received differently if Marvel gave you 12 issues to breathe the story out?
No, I think it would have been, as it was a little repetitive.
Okay.
I would have loved if it was 48 pages, and just everybody just got the rip snot out of it, and that was it. But I was glad that it's as long as it is because A, it's still being published, and B, I get to look at Dave's work. This is young Dave. He's better now. I hate it when artists get better. It just drives me.
I just think he's marvelous. We spoke briefly at Terrificon as well, and I was like, I'm like, I have so much of your stuff at home from the last 20 something years of my life.
Yeah.
And I'll tell the people out there, Jeph is delight. He was very nice to me at Terrificon. He didn't have to give me the time of day. He was nice. Here he is coming on the show. And I even bumped into him and David Finch and Anna Senti and Chris Claremont Friday evening at Terrificon. And they were beautiful.
Arthur Adams.
An amazing picture with us.
Yep.
Arthur Adams, yeah.
So, and Arthur Adams, yes, who I also talked to at Terrificon. And you're just a great and clearly through this interview an empathetic person who puts his creators and collaborators first. And I love talking to beautiful creators and people that are good to other people. So thank you so much, Jeph. You've been so generous with your time.
You guys have asked really good questions. I'm sorry to everyone who has to listen to this that I can't just answer yes or no. I have to tell a story and then another story.
That's like, I suffer from the same affliction. It's okay. And many of our audience members, especially Zach, the Tales of a True Believer, are hanging on every word.
Yeah, and Cliff, there was somebody a few up. I can't really see it on the chat, but they had said, Jeph, just so you know, also including that we've been after 2 hours. He's like, I could watch this for the rest of my life.
All I can tell you is I'm a huge John Suntes fans and give a shout out to Word Balloon.
Same person.
Which is probably not the right thing to do when you're in someone else's podcast, but nonetheless.
I know John. He's a good guy.
He had asked me to come on, and I said, look, I'm on a deadline. You and I are going to start talking, and he goes, I'll cut you off in an hour. I said, okay, that's what we'll do. 3 hours later, I go, dude, I got to go. And he goes, that's fine. I said, but you got to do me a favor. He said, okay. I said, you got to cut this into 3 different shows. And I don't care whether or not you run them every day, or I don't care whether or not you run them 1 week after another. I don't care what you do, but you cannot make someone sit through 3 hours of me. Like that's like the worst wish you could ever put on anybody. And he goes, got it. Not a problem. I run into him in wherever the next time I run into him. I said, what'd you wind up doing with that Word Balloon thing? He goes, oh, I just ran into 3 hours. He goes, the number of people who called me and said, I've listened to the whole thing. I said, who has 3 hours? Who wants to listen to me for 3 hours? I'm looking
Commutes are a thing, my friend.
This is 2 hours. I hope you guys break it into 15 minutes.
No, so what's funny is both things will be true. I will have the full video on my YouTube. Rich will have the full video. Rich will make the breaks for all of social media. So you will see them on TikTok and YouTube, and you'll see the reels on Instagram. And then, of course, when I get a hold of those, I usually link them back to this if anyone wants to see the whole interview. But what I have personally done and what I've experienced and what friends of mine have personally done and experienced is usually stuff like this we'll listen to on our commute.
Well,
so like the last time,
unless you're commuting from New York to Africa, I don't know how you're going to listen to this.
I did your entire interview on Word Balloon in 3 days, half hour each way to and from work. 3 days, I was done. Oh, and I also cheated by listening at 1.25 speed, so that helped.
Well, I'm very grateful. I'm sure John is too. Listen, guys, just thank you for having fun. And, you know, you had great questions. So
Yeah.
if anybody enjoys this, give yourself a pat on the back.
Yeah, we hope to see you again soon. And if you have any new projects that you ever want to promote, give me a shout.
As people say to me, what are you working on? The answer is very simple. The other half of Hush 2. And I will tell you this. If you're in that group, which doesn't feel that Hush 2 lives up to Hush 1, you haven't read the whole story. You've only read 6 issues. If you go back and read the first 6 issues of Hush 1, you don't know what's going on. You have no idea what Tommy's plan is. So what's Tom's plan? We don't understand. What's Hush's plan? You know what? You didn't know then. You don't know now. The back half of this story kicks ass, and what Jim is doing is exceptional. And when it's all collected in its 12 parts and people read it for the first time, I'm very proud of them. And I hope that you guys will enjoy it.
We do, and it's been a fun read thus far. And Jeph, on a personal note, I don't know if you remember when after the first Batman Hush came out, Wizard magazine sold an alternative version of Hush doll, and I ordered 2 of those. I've since sold one, but I still have one.
Don't, and there's so much. Whenever I go to a show, I run into merch that. Like there's like 15 Red Hulks that Funko make, and I'm like, which one's this? Like, why is this different than the last 4 that I saw? No, I run into Hushes. I love that McFarlane's going to do one, and I hope I'm not spoiling that. Look, it was a really fun time, but it was a very challenging assignment. Paul Levitz came to us and said, we need a new toy for the toy box. Mm-hmm. We need an iconic character that people are going to remember and talk about. And I was like, oh, gee, that's great. It's like going to a guy going, we need you to build another Empire State Building. That's not hard at all. And the design and the choice of the way that he presented him, Jim just got it. Just like looked at it and went, it's a guy with bandage on his face and a trench coat, and we're gonna just dig him. And I was like, okay, let's go. So,
and Joe, Loeb, we'll give you an easy way to come on out. Can you, for us, in whatever type of verbiage you would like to say, just be like, hey, I'm Jeph Loeb, and you're watching Behind the Panels.
Hi, I'm Jeph Loeb, and you're watching Behind the Panels. Enjoy.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen. Take good care. Have a good evening.
You as well.
Stay where you are, and I'm going to go to dinner.
Yes, sir.
Enjoy.
You have a great evening. Thank you, sir.
Deserved.
All right.
And I'll be on Magic Glass on Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're going to cover 3 issues written by Jeph Loeb. We're going to do Superman Batman 20, and we're doing Superman 155 and 157. So join me over there on Sunday night.
Enjoy. Take good care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeph.
Bye.
Good night.